Fakes left, now taken off. Gonna run for it, he got it! And there he goes! Inside the 10, the 5. Oh, the play of the year!
Send him out to the right. Jackson backing up, backing away, under pressure, and down the sideline he goes. Lamar Jackson, can he stay in bounds all the way? He stopped inside the 1.
MVP right now is Josh Allen at 1 and Lamar Jackson at number 2.
Hello, everyone. This is the Pocket Passer. I'm your host, Randy White. I hope all of you are having a fantastic day. I know I am because we're talking about football, and more specifically, we're having an MVP conversation. The NFL MVP is an award primarily dominated by narratives. How we feel about a player controls who wins this award more than anything. And I think the best example of that situation is right now and last year. In 2023, Lamar Jackson won the MVP, and we're going to get into his numbers and why I think and why I said at the time and why I will die on this hill. No way he should have been the MVP last year. If you look at the numbers, if you look at the context, there's just no reason that he should have been the MVP last year, and why it is that Josh Allen should not be the favorite to win the MVP right now. We get so caught up in narratives. It's who had the worst game more recently that's going to knock you off, who had the worst game, who had the best game most recently that's going to rise you up. And we're not going to look at the big picture and who's really the most valuable player. Remember, there's a big difference between valuable and best. And a lot of the times those things are different. So if we look at this year's numbers, Josh Allen this year, 300-something rush yards, 5 touchdowns. He's 8th in passing yards. He's 6th in passing touchdowns. He's got 5 picks. He's 13th in yards per attempt, and he's 24th in completion percentage. That's minimum 150 attempts. You look at Lamar Jackson this year. He's 2nd in passing yards, 2nd in passing touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 2nd in yards per attempt, 14th in completion percentage. Again, minimum 150 passing attempts. Just hearing those numbers, who the hell should be the MVP? And by the way, Joe Burrow would be the front runner over both these guys if his team was worth a damn at all, but you just can't justify giving the MVP award to a team with a losing record that's not going to make the playoffs. You got to make the playoffs to win that award, in my opinion. So it's got to be the most valuable player on a good team. Not the best team, but a good team. And that's just not the case for the Bengals, so he's out. Otherwise, the narrative would probably be pretty strong in his favor. But the narrative obviously very strong for Lamar this year because he's kind of been the darling of the NFL the last several years, along with Mahomes. Those two guys are the favorite quarterbacks in the league by most media personalities. Josh Allen gets heavy criticism for his turnover tendencies over the past several years. This year he's only got 5 picks. He's thrown a pick in 4 straight games, though. He had 0 5 weeks ago. Now he's got 5. He's thrown 5 in the last 4 games, so hopefully he's able to right that ship, not make this current trend a continuous trend. But here's what I mean by narratives. Last year, Lamar Jackson, with much, much worse numbers, won the MVP. Lamar Jackson last year, 15th in passing yards, 11th in passing touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Pretty good. Actually, really good for interceptions. 4th in yards per attempt, 9th in completion percentage, minimum 150 attempts. So when you look at those numbers and you go, oh, 15th in passing yards and 11th in passing touchdowns, and by the way, the 800-some rushing yards that he had still would not put him really relatively close to the top 5 or the top 4 in total yards. So you look at a guy like Josh Allen, who the killer for him last year was turnovers, but he was 4th in passing yards, 5th in passing touchdowns, but he also had 15 rushing touchdowns, which put him 1st in total touchdowns. And unlike Jalen Hurts, who got all of his touchdowns, or a large chunk of his touchdowns, from the 1-yard line with tush pushes, Josh Allen was scrambling on non-free touchdowns and scoring. Not to take a dig at Jalen Hurts, because he's a great player too, and I really like Jalen Hurts, but just trying to set that narrative straight. But 18 interceptions, which was 1st, 12th in yards per attempt, 12th in completion percentage, minimum 150 attempts. So when you look at Josh's numbers, what's the first thing you see? Interceptions? Sure, that's fair. But also, his team relies on him to go out there and make something happen much more than Lamar Jackson's Ravens last year relied on him to go out there and make something happen on a play-by-play basis. Not to say Lamar wasn't amazing last year, wasn't really good last year, wasn't deserving of recognition and praise last year, but for God's sake, people, the MVP award last year was pure nonsense. I was saying it at the time. I'll say it now. I will die on this hill. I'm never going to change my mind about that. It should have been either Josh Allen, Dak Prescott, or Christian McCaffrey. Any three of those guys, hell, Tua, so we'll put 4 in there. But any three of those guys needed to be the award winner, or Tyreek Hill needed to be the award winner for MVP over Lamar Jackson. He didn't have the numbers or the context to back it up last year. His defense was first in the NFL. They were fantastic. They had a great run game. Now they have a great run game again this year, an even better run game. But that's not a good argument. The Bills have a very good run game. Both these offenses this year, very balanced, and they're both executing at a high level quarterback and run game, pass game and run game. Last year, Lamar Jackson, yes, did he execute? Yes, did he protect the football? Absolutely. And he's doing an even better job of protecting the football this year, but everything else has gone up. He's second in passing yards. He's never been a true passer the way he has been this year. We're watching the culmination of years and years of hard work because I respect the hell out of Lamar Jackson's mentality, the way he approaches the game, and the way he works. I'm a big fan of Lamar, and as critical as I have been over the last several years because of his lack of an ability to sit back and play quarterback, throw the ball on time, and really go out there and execute a passing game at a high level, those shortcomings were very much there. They're not there this year nearly as much. Now, does he still have some inconsistencies in accuracy? Absolutely. Does he still make some boneheaded plays? Absolutely. But most guys do. So does Josh Allen, who I'm a big fan of as well. But when you look at who they were last year, who they are this year, it is very clear to me that Josh Allen, Dak Prescott, Christian McCaffrey should have been ahead of Lamar last year. This year, Josh Allen is the favorite to win the MVP because he just beat the darling Chiefs. They were undefeated. He knocked them off. Now the Bills are 8-2. Their defense is playing really good. They're in a very balanced offense where Josh Allen doesn't have to save them every single play. So what happens now? Their turnovers go down because he doesn't feel like he has to play hero ball all the time because they've got a real run game with Joe Brady, who's established a run game, more aggressive in the run game. The offensive identity is completely different than it was. They actually have an identity instead of Josh, please save us. So they're actually doing something now, and this is why I say he should have been the MVP last year, because literally all they did last year was just, Josh, please save us. Josh, please save us. Our defense can't stop him in the clutch moments. Josh, we need you to score again. Josh, if you turn the ball over once or twice, we lose. It's over. Like, that was what the load was on Josh Allen last year, was be perfect or we lose. He threw 18 picks, so they lost a lot. Then they went on a massive win streak. He started playing better. They were super explosive. He led the league in touchdowns because they didn't have a real run game. They didn't have a true identity. They just said, Josh, please save us. That says MVP all over the place. That writes MVP. That is most valuable player. That's, hey, if any other quarterback was running that offense besides a Lamar Jackson or a Patrick Mahomes or a select few guys, Joe Burrow, they would be a 4-win team at best. But Josh Allen's leading that offense, and they end up with the second seed in the AFC, winning the division, coming from behind to win the division, and beating the divisional opponent in the final game of the season to propel themselves into that spot, in a potential spot where if they lose that game, they don't even make the playoffs. So yes, 18 interceptions is a lot. He turned the ball over a lot. But for the love of God, when you hear the words most valuable, what screams it more than Josh Allen's performance last year? I can't think of one. But the narrative was the Ravens are the 1 seed. They're incredible. Therefore, Lamar Jackson is the best football player in the NFL. Ridiculous tendency by fans and media to fall for this. Should have been Josh Allen last year. Now this year, what do we see? Josh Allen is still incredible. He's not any worse than he was last year. I'd argue he's better. But how are the Bills using him? Are they as dependent on him as they were last year? No, they have a well-balanced offense, and they're honestly asking him to do a whole lot less. So the argument for MVP becomes a little diminished. Derrick Henry's amazing in Baltimore. They have a well-balanced offense. So now the situations are pretty similar. So you can't really say one of these guys is more pivotal to their team than the other. It's not a fair thing to do for either of those guys. Lamar Jackson, you plug him out, Ravens are obviously much worse. Josh Allen, you take him out, Bills are obviously much worse. Now, the same is true last year, but again, the shift is much more dramatic last year, or the distribution of usage is much more dramatic last year. This year, much more even, great run game. Now, the Ravens have a better run game, and the Ravens have a better running back in Derrick Henry. obviously. But James Cook is pretty damn good too, and the structure of their offense is relatively similar in terms of how much they're asking their quarterback to do. But what has Lamar Jackson done with that workload? He's second in passing yards. He's second in passing touchdowns. He's got 3 picks. He's second in yards per attempt. He's 14th in completion percentage, which isn't amazing. But then he's also got 5 more. He's got 5 rushing touchdowns. Him and Josh had the same amount of rushing touchdowns. He's got 200 more rushing yards than Josh. So when you look at the transition from last year to this year, and you go, oh, okay, so now as far as dependency, it's closer, and you can start to make a stats argument. And then you look at the stats and you go, oh, Lamar's stats are kind of dramatically better than Josh Allen's. So what are we doing here? It's pretty simple. It's pretty cut and dry, right? Now, Joe Burrow, if the Bengals were worth a damn, would be the MVP favorite. But they're not worth a damn. So you got to look at the teams that are good. The Chiefs, well, Patrick Mahomes has just miserable stats, so he can't be the MVP. Okay, let's look at someone else. Kirk Cousins. Well, the Falcons are on a little bit of a slide, and their record is way worse, so it's kind of tough to justify it, especially with the fact that he is playing worse right now, and 17 touchdowns doesn't compete with Lamar's numbers, and he's behind in yards, although it is very close. Geno Smith leads the league in yards per game. He's been fantastic. What about him? Well, he's got 11 touchdowns and 11 picks, and their team isn't as good. They're fighting for a playoff spot right in there in the mix with the NFC West, but they're not pulling away like Baltimore is, even though Baltimore's not winning their division and Pittsburgh now has a lead on them. But Baltimore has established themselves as a very clear playoff team, so obviously he's going to get the nod. Okay, what about C.J. Stroud? Texans on a little bit of a slide, and C.J. Stroud has half the passing touchdowns that Lamar does. Okay, how about Brock Purdy? Well, the 49ers are 5-5. They're on a slide. They're much worse than last year, and Brock Purdy's numbers, 13 touchdowns, 8 picks, don't compare to Lamar's at all. Okay, let's look at Stafford. Stafford, well, the Rams are like 5-5, 13 touchdowns, 7 picks. That doesn't compare to Lamar's numbers. All right, let's look at Baker Mayfield. He's a real candidate. Baker Mayfield's a real MVP candidate if the Buccaneers start winning and they can make a playoff push. But until they make a true, real, respectable playoff push, it's not Baker Mayfield either. Jared Goff, he just had a 5-interception game and they won anyway. So what does that say about the best team in football, in my opinion, the Detroit Lions? Well, not that they could play with anybody, but their quarterback can have a terrible game and they can still win. Kind of defeats the whole point of the narrative. Now, if you had 5 picks and they lost that game, I honestly think the argument for MVP is more relevant. I honestly think it's more there because it's, oh, if he has a really bad game, they don't have a shot at winning. But they won anyway, despite a really bad game. So you can say, hey, Jared Goff, now obviously when they play a great team that's on, you can't have that. But if you can get away with winning the game when your quarterback throws 5 picks and the opposition only throws 2, so you have a -3 turnover margin and still win the game, hard to justify that. Sam Darnold, his interceptions have spiked. The Vikings aren't playing as well, although they're still playing really well, and their record is still really good, and they're the 5 seed right now in the NFC. Darnold's playing worse, 19 touchdowns. Now he's got 10 picks. That's 7 more than Lamar. Jaden Daniels, he's got 3 picks just like Lamar. He's also got 15 less passing touchdowns and 500 less passing yards, and the Commanders are worse. And Jaden Daniels is clearly worse. And the way their offense is structured is clearly less dependent on him. They're not asking him to do as much. So he's not in the argument. So I was editing this video and I kind of noticed that it looks like I might be hating on Jaden Daniels a little bit. That's not the way I intended it to be. I think Jaden Daniels is fantastic. I think he's the front runner for Offensive Rookie of the Year right now. He's been terrific. I just don't think he's a legitimate MVP candidate. I don't think he ever was this year a legitimate MVP candidate. Everyone kind of, I think, felt like they wanted him to win MVP. Could be really cool for a rookie to do that, but that's just not in the cards. And the way the Commanders' offense uses him, it's just not to the degree of as advanced stuff as what Lamar is doing. Not saying they don't ask him to turn it loose and throw the rock around, because he clearly can and does do it. But it's the reins are still a little tighter than they are for these elite guys that have been in the league for 6 years, and understandably so. Jaden Daniels is fantastic. He's just not an MVP candidate. Bo Nix is catching him, though, so we're going to keep our eyes open for that. I actually made a video talking about how great Jaden Daniels is and doing some film breakdowns on him. So that video will be linked at the end of this video if you guys are interested in that. Now back to the video. I could keep going, but I think you get the point. There's no real MVP candidates outside of Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson right now. Baker Mayfield can find himself in there. The Los Angeles Chargers throw the ball the least of any team in the entire NFL. There's no argument for Justin Herbert to be the MVP. I'm sorry. I love Justin Herbert. I think he's a fantastic quarterback. You could argue fringe top 5, but he's just not an MVP candidate. They don't use him enough. So that's just not a real argument. I mean, he's got 13 touchdowns. 1 pick is insane. It's insane. But the volume isn't there. So I can't sit there and have this conversation. It's between Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. If the Bengals, by the grace of God, make a late playoff push, win out, go 10-7 and make the playoffs, Joe Burrow's your MVP. And it's case closed. It's just over. The discussion's over. Because if they make the playoffs, it's going to be because Joe Burrow continues to be amazing and the defense plays a little better. That's what it's going to be. So Joe Burrow's the MVP if the Bengals make the playoffs. Case closed. There's no argument there. I don't know how there would be. If the Buccaneers make a playoff push and end up winning their division, which they very well can, because the Falcons are struggling as well. Baker Mayfield is a very real MVP candidate, but right now it's Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, and the numbers for Lamar are dramatically better. This shouldn't be a discussion. I encourage everyone to not agree with me, but consider what I'm suggesting and just consider the ideas I'm suggesting and really think about what you're being fed by the media, by your peers, and do I just take what I'm hearing and run with it, or do I really sit and think and have a thoughtful moment with myself about what I'm hearing and decide, is this really correct? Is there really ground to stand on this opinion, on this argument, or is this person just saying what they feel? Big difference between feelings and facts. Not trying to be Ben Shapiro, but that's just the reality of it. We got to all be better, and that includes myself. I fall prey to it as well. That's my message for both myself and everyone watching this video. I appreciate all of you. If you've made it to this point in the video, if you enjoyed this video, consider smashing that like button, leaving a comment on your thoughts on the MVP conversation or any other awards: Offensive Player of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Defensive Rookie of the Year, Coach of the Year, Comeback Player of the Year. Drop your predictions or your opinions as to who you think should win in the comments below. Smash that subscribe button if you want to see more videos. Turn on notifications so you won't miss my future uploads. I've been going, I think, 6 or 7 straight days with an upload. I appreciate all of you, and I will see all of you in the next video. Peace.